the hidden psychology of anger. What a bear and a bee can teach you about mastering your temper SCRIPT 30-minute audio format. Have you ever lost your temper over something small and ended up making everything worse? Maybe you've snapped at someone you love, sent an angry email you regretted, or said something in the heat of the moment that damaged a relationship. If you're nodding your head right now, you're not alone. What if I told you that a simple children's story about a bear and a bee holds the secret to understanding why we lose control? And more importantly, how we can finally master our emotions before they master us. Stay with me, because by the end of this episode, you'll understand the hidden psychological patterns that trigger your anger, and you'll have practical strategies to transform your relationship with this powerful emotion forever. The story of the bear and the bee is deceptively simple on the surface. A bear wants honey, gets stung by a protective bee, loses his temper, and ends up with thousands of stings instead of just one. But beneath this simple tale lies a profound truth about human psychology that most of us struggle with every single day. This isn't just about anger management. This is about understanding the deeper mechanisms of emotional regulation, impulse control, and the hidden costs of reactivity in our modern lives. Let's start by unpacking what really happens in this story from a psychological perspective. The bear's journey mirrors our own emotional patterns in ways that are almost uncomfortable to recognize. He begins with a simple desire, a need for honey. There's nothing wrong with wanting something. In fact, desire is a fundamental part of being human. But watch what happens next. The moment the bear encounters an obstacle, a single bee protecting its hive, his entire emotional landscape shifts. This is the critical moment we need to understand, because this is where most of us go wrong in our daily lives. The bee's first warning is reasonable. It tells the bear to go away, that this honey doesn't belong to him. But the bear's response reveals something crucial about how anger actually works in our minds. He doesn't just ignore the warning, he makes it personal. He asserts his dominance. He tells the bee that he's bigger, stronger, and can do whatever he wants. This is the ego taking over, and this is where the real trouble begins. When our ego gets involved in a conflict, we're no longer thinking rationally. We're operating from a place of pride, entitlement, and the need to prove something to ourselves and others. Think about the last time you got into an argument with someone. Really think about it. Was it actually about the issue at hand, or was it about proving you were right? Was it about solving a problem, or was it about asserting your dominance in the situation? The bear's response to the bee is almost laughably transparent in its ego-driven motivation. But we do the exact same thing every single day, just in more subtle ways. We interrupt someone mid-sentence because we need them to know we have the answer. We escalate a minor disagreement because backing down feels like losing. We hold on to grudges because admitting we were wrong feels like defeat. The bee then does what any creature would do when threatened. It defends itself by stinging the bear right on the nose. And this is the second critical moment in the story. The bear has a choice here. He could acknowledge the pain, recognize that he crossed a boundary, and walk away. He could learn from this small consequence and adjust his behavior. But instead, he does what so many of us do when we're hurt or embarrassed. He escalates. He gets angrier. He finds a weapon. He decides that now it's not just about getting honey anymore. Now it's about revenge. Now it's about teaching that be a lesson. Now it's about winning. This escalation pattern is one of the most dangerous psychological traps we fall into, and it happens faster than we realize. Psychologists call this emotional hijacking. When we feel threatened, hurt, or embarrassed, our amygdala, the primitive part of our brain responsible for survival responses, takes over from our prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational thinking, and in that moment, we're not really thinking anymore. We're reacting, and reactions, especially angry ones, rarely lead to good outcomes. The bear swings his stick wildly at the bee, but the bee is too fast. This detail is more significant than it might seem. The bear is using brute force to solve a problem that requires finesse. He's using aggression to solve a problem that requires strategy. He's using his size and strength to solve a problem that actually requires intelligence and so. How often do we do this in our own lives? How often do we try to force a solution, bulldoze through an obstacle, or overpower a situation when what's really needed is patience, understanding, or simply walking away. As the bear gets more and more frustrated, his anger grows. The story says he gets angrier and angrier, and this is a perfect description of how rage builds on itself. Anger has this terrible quality where it feeds itself. Each failed attempt to hit the bee makes him more frustrated, which makes him swing harder, which makes him more frustrated when he misses again. It's a vicious cycle. And once you're caught in it, it's incredibly hard to break free. This is why people who lose their temper often describe feeling out of control, as if the anger has a life of its own. In a very real sense, it does. When the bear finally smashes the beehive to pieces, he probably feels a moment of triumph. He probably thinks he's won. He probably feels that rush of satisfaction that comes from destroying the thing that frustrated him. But, of course, this is the moment when everything falls apart. Thousands of bees pour out of the destroyed hive. And now the bear faces consequences far worse than the single sting he received initially. This is the inevitable result of unchecked anger. When we let our temper control us, when we lash out and destroy things in our rage, the consequences are almost always worse than the original problem we faced. Let's pause here and talk about what this means for your life right now. Think about the last time you lost your temper. Maybe it was in traffic when someone cut you off. Maybe it was at work when a colleague criticized your idea. Maybe it was at home when your partner or a child did something that irritated you. In that moment, you had the same choice the bear had. You could have taken a breath, stepped back, and chosen a measured response. Or you could have escalated, attacked, and made things worse. Most of us, if we're honest, have chosen the bear's path more times than we'd like to admit. The consequences the bear faces are immediate and physical. He gets stung repeatedly on his ears, elbows, arms, legs, hands, and especially on his nose. The nose is significant here because that's where he received the first sting, the one that started this whole cascade of poor decisions. It's as if the universe is saying, you should have learned from this the first time. But the consequences we face in our human lives are often more subtle and more devastating than physical pain. We lose relationships. We damage our reputations. We create environments of fear and tension around us. We teach our children that anger is the appropriate response to frustration. We close doors to opportunities because people don't want to work with someone who can't control their temper. When the bear finally escapes the swarm and slams the door behind him, he probably feels relief. He's safe now. The immediate danger is over. But then comes the moment of reckoning that so many of us experience after we've lost our temper. Mrs. Bear is there, and she says something that cuts deeper than any bee sting. You did it again, didn't you? You lost your temper. These words contain a history. This isn't the first time. This is a pattern. The bear has done this before, probably many times before. And this is perhaps the saddest part of the story, because it means the bear hasn't learned from his past experiences. He keeps making the same mistake over and over again. How many of us are stuck in this same pattern? How many of us have people in our lives who could say the exact same thing to us? You did it again. You lost your temper. You let your anger control you. You made things worse instead of better. You hurt someone you love. You damaged something that mattered. You created a problem that didn't exist before. The pattern of reactive anger is one of the most destructive cycles we can fall into. And the tragic thing is that most people don't even realize they're in it until the damage is done. The bear sits there crying and counting his bee stings, while Mrs. Bear brings him medicine. This image is powerful because it shows the aftermath of uncontrolled anger. There's pain, there's regret, there's the need for healing. And there's also the presence of someone who loves him despite his flaws. Someone who's been through this with him before. Someone who's probably tired of watching him make the same mistakes but still shows up with the medicine he needs. How many people in our lives play this role? How many times have they had to help us pick up the pieces after we've lost control? Then comes the final twist that really drives the message home. Mrs. Bear tells him they have honey in the cupboard. It was behind the flower all along. He never needed to go into the forest. He never needed to confront the bee. He never needed to get stung even once, let alone thousands of times. The thing he wanted was already his. He just didn't look carefully enough. He acted impulsively, driven by his immediate desire, and he paid a terrible price for something he already had access to. This is perhaps the most devastating realization of all, that the end